Welcome back to Animal Crossing New Horizons. I'm Dear Darling. As you see what's going on our lovely island of Fawnhollow today, where, as you know, I talked about yesterday, I will be talking about hold on, Renfield. That's what the movie's called today, because you know this is what like the Animal Crossing thing's all about. I'm not recreating Renfield. I'm not doing anything with my daily vlog, of course. For any newcomers coming here, this has basically got no relevance to Renfield apart from the fact that I watched it yesterday, and this is what I do in my daily vlog. I just talk about things I've seen recently, to be honest. So yeah, and actually tomorrow we're going to talk about Here Comes Nico, because I actually finished that game today. I recorded the final episodes. But anyway, hello everyone. Right now in Fawnhollow, it's 5:19 PM on Sunday, April 16th, 2023. So yeah, I watched Renfield yesterday, which was literally a movie which I kind of forgot even came out. The only thing I ever heard about it is I saw its name written down somewhere where it was like upcoming movies Renfield, and I didn't think much about it. But of course, yesterday I went out with a few friends. It was a bit of an not impromptu. Wait, is impromptu right word I'm thinking? Where it's sort of just like it was a bit of a random happenstance that we all just like came out. And, you know, it was like, what should we do? Let's go watch a movie. What movie have we not all seen? And it's like Renfield. I was like, oh yeah, I forgot that was a movie. Now, I don't really know much about Renfield. I've not seen the original Dracula, Nosferatu, etc., etc. I don't know where he initially comes up. I've not read Bram Stoker's Dracula. I'm not, you know, super into vampire folklore or anything. Not that I have anything particularly against it. I've just, you know, never been particularly, like, driven or enamoured by it in the first place. So, you know, it's hard for me to really know the lore behind it, I suppose. But my extent of my knowledge of what Renfield is I know he's Dracula's familiar. Even before the movie, I kind of knew that. And the only reason I knew that is because there's this game called One Night Ultimate Werewolf, which had like a DLC quote content called One Night Ultimate Vampire, and one of the characters you can get Dracula and you can get Renfield. I don't remember what Renfield does. I think Renfield is a minion, the equivalent of a minion in the base game. So he's on the werewolf / obviously the vampire team, and he wants, if he dies, it still counts as a victory for his respective team or something like that, I think. Or he like gives a mark or something. It's been ages since we played One Night Ultimate Werewolf, I'm going to be honest. And honestly, One Night Ultimate Werewolf isn't even as good as the base game plus Daybreak. IMO, but even then I'm not like super jazzed about those games. So it depends. Your mileage may vary. Anyway, sorry, to talk about the actual movie itself. Oh god, my water bottle here. I just dropped it on the floor. I would give it like 6.5 out of 10, you know. It's similar to what I'd say for Mario, how I rate the Mario movie, where I'm like, it's good, but it's not like anything to write home about. You know, it's enjoyable enough to watch. You know, and there's no point I was watching it where I was like, man, this sucks. I hate watching this. You know, that's so, you know, every movie where I don't hate it actively, I suppose, is at least a 5 in my book. But I don't think it was like particularly amazing. I think I'd put it like similar to like how Marvel movies are sort of like a, you know, switch your brain off, just like relax, have a fun time. This was a similar sort of thing, but it was more like a horror movie with comedic aspects. So, you know, what do I think about horror and comedy in general? I think it can be, you know, done well. You know, I often say that Parasite is like one of my favourite movies of all time, and it's not really a horror movie, it's more of like a thriller, but it's a similar sort of thing where I'm like, I think it balances it particularly well. Renfield, I think, did okay. It did pretty well from a comedic aspect, I think. But I think when, basically my summary of it is, like, when it tries to do more serious things, it kind of doesn't commit hard enough to its serious moments, that it ends up falling kind of like a bit flat, I would say, most of the time. So part of me sort of just like, should have just maybe gone for Marvel and, you know, just had it been like comedic, good fun or whatever. But, you know, so be it. There's a lot of good like highlights. I guess now we're starting to get into light spoilers. You know, Nicolas Cage as Dracula was actually, and I can't remember what the lead actor's called who plays Renfield, but those two were both like fantastic at their roles. I would say Awkwafina's in this movie. I don't really hate Awkwafina or anything. I've only seen her in like 2 movies. Like, I've only seen her in Shang-Chi, which I thought she was fine in. You know, fine to good, to be honest. And I've seen her in this movie where I thought she was fine acting wise. I just thought her character was really boring. Or not really boring. It's just like more could have been done with her character. What else happened in the movie? There's like mafia bosses or whatever. Like the head mafia godfather or godmother, I suppose, of a mafia family was. I thought she would be more interesting, but she actually turned to be kind of boring. And then the son was actually probably like a big driving force of a comedic aspect of the film. Oh, I gotta look up. I was gonna look up like who he was, because I was like, I've seen you before in something, but I don't know what I've seen you before in. Renfield, IMDb. What's his name? Like Tony Lobo, something like that. Oh, Tedward Loby. Ben Schwartz. Where have I seen you from? You're in Parks and Rec. Is that it? You're in Sonic the Hedgehog, maybe? Apparently. I haven't seen Parks and Rec, but maybe I just seen you in screenshots or something. Anyway, so Renfield. I guess now we're actually getting into the spoiler category. Well, okay, before we get into spoiler category, if you like horror and comedy, you'd probably enjoy this movie, is probably what I'd say. Is it something I'd go out your way to watch if you're not particularly jazzed on horror or comedy, or combinations of both? And I'd be like, if you find yourself being like, I gotta watch a movie, I don't think it's a bad choice, but I wouldn't go out my way, I suppose, to watch it necessarily. I think there are things which I do think in that actually are quite cool. You know, I do like a lot of his like directing and use of colour. I thought was actually pretty cool to look at. Again, I'm not a director or anything like that, nor like a costume designer, so I can't really comment too much about that sort of thing. But I thought it was pretty cool just to see like all, you know, the lighting and the colour choices that they used for like costumes, etc. Were fun. Basically, the atmospheric lighting was super cool. Plant a fruit tree. I guess we could do that on the island. Anything else I need to say? Deficits. I think its pacing was really weird. They also really like using this monologue thing, which I think worked out a little bit. It worked out fine, because I think without the monologue, the pacing would be even more like weird. There's a lot of moments in the thing where it feels like, I feel like there needs to be like an extra beat between those scenes or something, because it felt so direct. It felt just like it was pushing you like constantly, I suppose, going forward. Also, the movie is so on the nose, like it's so incredibly on the nose, and like it's things are like themes, and there's not much I would say in the way of subtlety, or maybe it's pretty subtle and it went over my head, which is fair enough. I'm just in your average viewer. I'm not like trying to look at these things from a critical eye. I'm just sort of watching them. But it's so on the nose with like everything, which is good and bad, I suppose, in equal aspects, because sometimes it's quite like, you know, it is quite an over-the-top comedic, you know, theatrical movie, I suppose. Cheesy is probably how I describe it. Okay, yes, now we're actually getting into spoiler space, I think. So if you haven't watched the movie and you care about spoilers, I wouldn't really care about spoilers. I think this movie is not particularly like subversive in many aspects, but if you care about spoilers, then feel free to click away. So what did I like about the movie? Like, I liked the interesting topics, the serious topics it tries to talk about. It's actually subverts my expectations. It portrays Renfield and Dracula's relationship as, I don't know much about them, but I assume Renfield was just some very loyal follower. But it actually portrays it basically like as a toxic relationship. Like, and by the way, I say portray, I mean it's so on the nose. Like, he actually goes to like toxic relationship meetings, and it's a driving force behind the plot. So I'm not going to pretend it's meant to be like some sort of subtle allegory or something. It's very much, you know, it's a toxic relationship, and I think the portrayal of it is very interesting, especially through the moments where you see Dracula actually be his true villainous self, like, and seeing the interactions between him and Renfield's fear and Dracula's like manipulation and sort of like the control he exerts over Renfield. And especially there's one the moment when Renfield, you know, is sort of made friends within like the support therapy group or whatever, and realizes they're in danger, and he tries to get them all out, and then Dracula comes and murders them all. I thought, I was like, wow, this is like a really like, it feels weird to say this is a great portrayal of a toxic relationship, but like, I mean, like a reasonably accurate portrayal, I'd say, of a toxic relationship. Like him taking away basically everything that Renfield loves or has, just to exert control, being like, and then the conversation between Dracula and Renfield in the apartment was really good, with Dracula constantly flipping it on Renfield, being like, I'm the victim, you are the, you know, you're the horrible person who's done all these horrible things, so it's your fault, etc. And also, actually, an interesting thing I think it does as well is it doesn't actually excuse Renfield from the stuff that he's done. Renfield obviously feeding innocence to Dracula for many years and doing a lot of horrible things as well, is still the victim in the situation between their toxic relationship, but he's also not excusing himself from the things he's done in the past. And I'm like, surprisingly nuanced, I suppose. if a story wasn't being told in a way that's like sort of smashing its themes over your head, then maybe I'd be like, hey, that's kind of like subtle, I suppose. But either way, I thought those moments when they delved into the more serious aspect were pretty cool. And I was like, oh, so this is a movie with like obviously very comedic elements at the same time as being able to tackle very sort of serious issues at the same time, and the melding of them together is really like, it's, I think, probably one of the hardest to genres to probably not literally the hardest two genres, but one of the hardest two to meld together is really light-hearted slapstick sort of comedy with deep, dark, serious stories to talk about, you know. Which is why I praise Parasite so much, because I think it does it in an incredible way. And this movie, I think, does it like iffily, you know, like it has those moments, you know, where I've talked about where I'm like, whoa, this is actually like an interesting like delve and dive into it, and then it just like sort of brushes it off to the side, and it just kind of takes a back seat most of the time and doesn't mesh super well. There's a lot of characters as well. Most of the characters don't really get much in the way of development. They're just kind of all there to drive the plot forward. It's more about like the main character, even like the second main character, like the cop Quincy, Rebecca Quincy, played by Awkwafina, doesn't really get much in the way of development. Like, and her character is just sort of like, is also, as I say, so on the nose. She's like, basically her entire character is, I'm a good cop in a really corrupt city, and I'm trying to do the right thing, but everything is kind of against me. Which is, you know, fair enough. And genuinely, I don't think Awkwafina was a problem in this role. I think she acted it completely fine. I just think the character itself was just so strange. And I don't really know she gets as much development, to be perfectly honest, like throughout the movie. I guess she like kind of trusts Renfield, but then kind of like distrusts him for good reasons. Like, I mean, all the time I was watching, I was like, yeah, you kind of have a good reason to distrust him, but still, like, it kind of accepts him at the end. Which is like, okay, fair enough, I guess. I will say, you know, at least I will say that the one thing it does well is that they very much establish what her personalities are, what her traits are. So when it comes to towards the end, I suppose, where it's like, ooh, is she actually betraying Renfield? I think it's very obvious, you sitting there as an audience being like, obviously she's not going to betray Renfield. Like, if I was just sitting like in the cinema. Basically what happens is, you know, she's so much about like doing the right thing, of course, and never like turning to the dark side or whatever, you know, holding strong with her convictions is a core like personality trait of hers, which is very much drilled into you. And then towards the end, it's like, Dracula's like, I can resurrect your sister as long as you join me. And then she's like, okay, if you can do it, then I'll join you. And then obviously, you know, you're sitting as an audience member being like, obviously she's going to betray him. But internally, I was like, I wasn't sure if they were actually going to do it or not, because I was like, I really, really hope this is obviously a plot. Like, if this isn't a plot to try and actually get Dracula in the end, I'm just going to lose my mind, because I'm like, why would you create this entire character with this? This is like her only defining personality traits. But luckily, I suppose not, maybe I should, you know, give more benefit of the doubt. She ends up trying to betray Dracula, and then, you know, it's sort of like didn't quite work. And then well, I feel like normally that would feel like the end point of a movie is like he gets burnt alive by the sunlight, and then that's it. It carries on for a little bit longer, which makes it feel kind of weirdly paced, I think. And then the way he actually dies is like he gets beaten up in like in a protection circle, which again, it's meant to be a sort of like dark comedy aspect of it. And honestly, I think that part landed okay, I'm gonna be honest. Not exactly my cup of tea because it's just like brutal violence, but it was quite funnily shot, I would say. Dracula was just, I think he was a pretty good villain. I'm gonna be honest. You know, he's just like a force of evil. He's very manipulative, etc., etc. He made a good villain. Renfield, I think he was a pretty interestingly portrayed character. He was a protagonist that you want to root for, I suppose, despite the fact that he's done pretty horrible things. The action scenes, oh, actually, this is another thing. In the movie, there's so many cuts in the action scenes. The action scenes, they're not like impossible to follow, but it is like quite jarring, I would say, watching it. Every single time I watch action scenes, I suppose now in like Hollywood movies, I always think back to the like Every Frame a Painting video where it's talking about how Jackie Chan's action scenes feel really different because they show like the entire force of a punch and they show it like twice. Well, a lot of the times in these like Hollywood things, like they cut away from the action shot every single time, which just makes it feel like you get the sense of a montage of action happening, but you never really feel the impacts. I felt like I got that a lot. A reasonable amount, I should say, with some of this movie. But also, it also goes in the other direction where it's a very gory and bloody movie is probably how I describe it. Like, it's so comically gory, I would say, and over the top. Like there's a point where like he rips off some guy's arms and starts beating other people up with his arms and impales 2 people with that guy's arms. And he cuts someone's arms off with like a dinner plate. You know, it's very over the top, and it's obviously meant to be sort of like slapstick dark comedy, which I'm not going to fault it for. Like obviously, like I'd be insane to fault it for. You know, that's very deliberately what we're going for, is this. But it is a shame that I think like the amount of cuts in the action scenes sometimes most of the time did take away from it when the cuts were like not at the most optimal places, I would say. You got something to give us? Fantastic biscuit. But I thought it was genuinely quite an enjoyable movie. I thought its comedy landed, you know, pretty well most like every time. I can't remember many moments where I was just like, oh, you know, that joke wasn't particularly funny. I was like, hey, you know, that joke at least got a slight chuckle out of me. What do I think the funniest moment was? That's actually a good question. It's hard for me to remember. What do I think the funniest moment was? I don't even remember most of the moments, to be particularly honest. Apparently we haven't spoken to Lily for ages, so I apologise. Yeah, I think Lily looks like Pepper from Here Comes Nico when she's wearing those glasses. Just pointing it out there. Yeah, I don't know. So all in all, it's like an enjoyable sort of movie where you just like sit down, shut off your brain, watch it. You know, don't overthink it. There's not much to overthink. The only thing that even if you're not overthinking, I think that like the weird pacing of it might throw you off a little bit. There's not like montage or like skipping around from what I can recall. But I think its directing was pretty cool. Yeah, the use of light was really cool. And I really loved the final fight scene with Dracula with like the light fading in and out. Which I apologise if you have photosensitivity, and that probably made that scene very difficult to watch. But basically, what happens is Rebecca's like plunged in. Dracula plunges the fighting area into darkness, so it's just Rebecca because Renfield has been like horribly beaten or something, and Rebecca's just like trying to sort of defend herself against Dracula, who keeps fading in and out, as the light also keeps fading in and out. It's like that was a really cool scene, and the blue and red lights, just like, oh man, the atmosphere was awesome. And it Chekhov gunned things pretty well. It's like, oh, Dracula's blood can heal people, and then, you know, Rebecca ends up using Dracula's blood to revive Renfield, and then the fact that the entire thing entire fight takes place in like a drug cartel's like gang hideout, so there was like white powder, shall we say, around the place, and then making a protection circle out of that. Yeah, I think it very much hinted pretty well to being like, hey, this will have relevance later. And then, you know, paying off with it at the same time. What I was going to say about it. Renfield's jumper when he turned over a new leaf was really awesome, is what I'd say. I was like, I thought it during the movie. I was like, that's a really nice like sweater. And then my friend also said after, it was like, I really liked his sweater. And I was like, I thought the exact same thing. That was such a lovely looking sweater. What else? Yeah. Teddy Lobo, probably the funniest character. A lot of it, most of the other characters, I would say, are quite forgettable. I'm going to be honest. You know, Renfield, Dracula, Quincy, and then you have Teddy Lobo, and then you kind of remember the Madre Lobo. I can't remember her name, to be honest, but the mother of the crime family. And then the others are just like, I don't even remember who Mark is. Chris is like Quincy's corrupt cop friend who betrayed her. Who the heck is Mark? Kate, that's Quincy's sister, who gets no screen time really, and then gets killed, and then gets brought back to life. Oh wait, is Mark the guidance counsellor during the meetings? He is alright. Caitlin? Who's Caitlin? Carol's one of the... Oh, Caitlin and Carol are people from... And Carla, they're all people from the toxic relationship, the codependent support group. Sharon? I think most of these people are just people from the codependent support group. Yeah, I don't know. quite a few characters. Most of them are just end up being like kind of side characters. Yeah, so I mean, what did it get on Rotten Tomatoes? It got IMDb rating of 6.8 out of 10. I think that's fair. Although to be fair, I think like IMDb ratings tend to be quite inflated, so maybe that's a bit lower than I expect. I would expected it to get like a 7.2 or something on IMDb, but hey, that's like apples and oranges. Oh, no, it's not really what I mean. That's like... Basically, it's not that big a difference, is what I mean to say. Actually, I don't know if we'd sell coconut. Oh, we probably do, because I think one of them is about selling things, isn't it? Hopefully that's just over 5,000. That's a lot over 5,000, it turns out. Yeah, Renfield. I do think the action, yeah, I think the lighting was generally the best part. Which might seem weird to say, but I don't know, if you watch a movie, you'd be like, wow, look at all this dramatic lighting all over the place. It's cool. What else? I don't really know what to say. What did I get on Rotten Tomatoes? Oh yeah, the comedy was pretty good as well. Rotten Tomatoes, Renfield. Oh, you know, my favourite moment was definitely when Ted Lobo introduced his mother to Dracula. It was like, that's Dracula in the flesh. And they start being like kind of flirty with each other. And then Teddy just goes, what? I don't know why I found that so funny. 60% critics, 59% critics, sorry, 80% audience. That seems about right. It's a thing which is fun to watch, but I don't think from a critical standpoint has particularly got much in the way of depth to it. Anyway, Renfield, I don't know, watch it if you want, don't watch it if you don't want. I'm going to round this episode up here. So if you have been watching, thank you very much. It's been Animal Crossing New Horizons. I've been Dear Darling. Likes, comments, subscription, shares, greatly appreciated. Twitter, Discord down below. Hope we see each other again, but for now, it's our farewell. So until next time, bye-bye for now. Oh, really bye-bye, I suppose.